Well, hey team, Grant Hagan here with DroneDeploy, joined with Brian Vizaretta, and we are super excited to be able to be coming with you guys here live on the LinkedIn. Thanks for tuning in with us. Brian and I have been looking forward to this for a long time, which is just the release of the Reality Capture Playbook here with DroneDeploy. And so, Brian, thanks for making the time. Excited to have you on here, and we're excited to get to chat through this.
Yeah, let's go. I'm excited for this too, especially because, we made like an earlier version of this playbook on the structure site side, and it definitely, we found ourselves really grasping for straws like when we started going to like substructure, like Earthworks phase. So, timing worked out. Prayers got answered, and we got acquired by DroneDeploy. So now this playbook actually feels more like something a little larger. So I'm excited. Good LinkedIn live session. We get to just riff on here. So
Yeah, this is going to be really fun. We hope that you guys find this useful. The intent of going live is really to be as interactive as possible. And so we see a few comments that are popping in here, and we would love to have you guys interact with us, add some comments, add some questions in here. We really have built this structure of this time to be interactive. And so please do talk with us here on the chat, and we will get to your questions answered. But really, just to kind of kick us off and start, we want to show you what this is in this playbook in its entirety. If you haven't seen it yet, we'll put a link into the chat as well for you guys to have access to it as well. And actually, let me do that right now that I can.
I actually see it in there right now. It says it's in the tiny URL.
Perfect. Okay, great. So if you haven't seen it and if you want to follow along with us, please feel free to do that. We're not going to go like probably page by page and word by word
Yeah.
of all these things, but we really just want to give you guys an opportunity to really engage with us, ask questions. If you've seen this and you were excited about this time coming up, to be able to really ask kind of some of the authors. So a little context, Brian and I worked on this project together with a few other folks here on the DroneDeploy team to obviously make it look as amazing as it does. And shout out to all the folks on the team that helped us to get to this point. But this was really something that kind of came out of the idea that Brian and I had from coming from the industry of just like, we need something to help communicate the value that reality capture can bring to your guys' projects, and really something that can speak to that over the whole life cycle of construction. I think the challenge that we hear from a lot of customers is just this idea of like having to jump from one tool to the next, and some things having parts and pieces of what they need, but really not covering the whole life cycle. And that's really what we wanted to do with this book, is really give you guys something that you could go and share with others, whether it's your project team or to just become more educated around other parts of the tool that maybe you guys haven't seen. And so, Brian, any thoughts that you'd want to add to that of kind of the why of really this deliverable and how we got here?
No, I think when you're talking about tech, it should be talked about, what phase of construction you're in, or um, even like the project type. Very, very often, like you're just thrown like a feature without really any context. So that's kind of where we wanted to talk about it.
Yeah. And if this is your first time interacting with the book too, like I said, we want to see some chat and some chatter on the LinkedIn live session here. And so please do just ask us questions. We would love to get to answer those. And really just an idea. I love kind of the format of the way that this was built. And again, we're not going to like go through and read every part and section of this, but all of these are hyperlinks. So if you didn't catch that the first time, you can actually click into any of these different spots and it'll take you to that part of the book. And so down here in the bottom left, it obviously can take you back to this table of contents page. So just a little hidden Easter egg there if you haven't seen that or knew that this was kind of put into the book as well. But what we were just talking about is what is reality capture and who is this kind of book for? Again, like you may have an idea of what reality capture is, but the idea of like why we wanted to create this and who it was for is really if folks didn't know what it was. And so that's why we kind of listed out here on this first page of really just what do we at DroneDeploy see reality capture being, and what's our vision of it? And this book doesn't go into all the details of those things on the bottom. If you haven't checked our latest product release explained, it really goes into those three components and pillars as well. So definitely go check that out. But Brian, kind of walk us through this, because this is like the main part that really sets up the rest of the whole book.
Yeah, I mean, even before going through that, right? Like I went out to dinner last night with an old PE that from a past company, and I was showing him the playbook. I mean, it's great because you kind of have it on your phone and just flipping through it. And he's like, "Yeah, like we have some facade issues right now on a project, like etc." And then you know, it got to a point where I was like, look, you're already taking site photos, right? Like all we're really doing is just making those site photos be more valuable, timestamped, location focused. Like reality capture sounds like this crazy new type of world, but it realistically is just site photos, just in a better, more organized way. And if you need to find them, that's where it is. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, well said. And I think like to give a little bit of like direction of like where is this book going, and really what's the kind of part of this that really sets up the rest is really this page. It's just the whole life cycle, right? So we kind of wanted to break it down by where you should be capturing from the ground and where you should be capturing from the air. A lot of people that we've interacted with are just like, yeah, we start using this tool when we start to put up the walls and where we do these milestones. And it was pretty clear that there wasn't maybe an idea of how this could get used throughout the whole life cycle. Whether you're coming at this playbook from either just the structure site side on the ground or just the drone deploy side from the air, this is really what you're going to see a lot of focus around as we put more content together, which is just around this idea of complete life cycle coverage. That's just what we hear. That's what you guys want. That's what we think we need in the industry as a tool. And so that's really kind of where this book sets it up. There's what we kind of call the main phases, which you can see those 6 parts up here, and then what we kind of use to describe the sub phases, because I think the reality of this is that there's critical capture milestones at each of these sub phases. And again, we'll get into this as we kind of walk through the book itself. But the main idea here is that whole life cycle capture, these are kind of what we see as the 6 main phases. And then obviously those notes underneath those are what we kind of consider the sub phases, which are what a lot of the book is created around, is the actual sub phases that you're going to see. Brian, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say just like mentally one of the largest milestones in like a company's like reality capture is capturing at other phases besides just in wall. So that's like your lowest, that at least on the structure site side, that was like your lowest hanging fruit. 360 photos. Oh, we can do this for in wall. Great. But like then you really start dissecting why it's not being used at earlier phases, and a lot of the time it came down to just photos taken at other stages just weren't organized enough to be able to be more predictive rather than reactive. So that's kind of like where we wanted to start showing, taking photos early on and having that same photo in the same location over time, whether it's from the air or the ground, is becomes more valuable because they're synced. You can overlay them, compare them, stuff like that.
Yeah, well said. And that's really a good point to bring up, is like maybe you're coming at this playbook as knowing one of these phases really well, and that's great. Like obviously you've become a master at it and know the value points at that phase, but this is really intended to kind of stretch the idea here that there are other phases that we really want to help show you guys to see in this whole life cycle of what DroneDeploy can be doing to help you guys capture your project. So I see a note in question here.
Yeah. We got Peter.
Download it. Yes, feel free to, Peter. I see your note back there on there too. So thanks for adding that in there. So
one thing to note though is this link is also gets updated on the back end. So if you keep this one link, every time we make updates, you won't have to download another link.
yeah,
We offered the download option, like if you want to print it out and just keep it in the field office or just something to hand out. But the link itself is one of the easiest things. Is I usually just like text somebody if they have a question, like what about this phase? So
yeah, and coming to a coffee table maybe near you, there's some ideas of how do we make a nice hard copy of it. And so if that's something that you're interested in, drop us a chat and we'll see about printing it out too. So all right, well, let's get into this. So really what I want to kind of start with is phases to document here. So one thing to note here, we're going to kind of follow along here at the bottom. You can kind of see these these phases that we're going to cover. And the first one that we're really going to cover is pre-construction. So that's really what we want to kind of focus on here, is really this phase. And this is what gets really exciting, because I think this is people's first exposure to using this tool, and really reality capture really kind of sets the tone throughout the whole life cycle. And the really cool part about this is where ground and air can get really, really impactful. So on the DroneDeploy side, and obviously capturing from the air, you guys want to mitigate risk as much as possible before you move onto the job site. And really that needs to be done from both the ground and the air. This pre-site survey idea is really something that I'm sure many of you have heard about before you're mobilizing on jobs, if you need to kind of document existing conditions, or if you just want to get a simple topography of your site that you're going to eventually move into and obviously build on. Doing that from both the ground and the air is so critical. And that's really why we felt like this was a huge component for people to know about that gets a ton of value out of in this pre-construction phase. Brian, do you want to kind of talk about the above ceiling stuff? Because that's what I think a lot of other
Yeah.
folks say they get a ton of value in the pre-con phase as well.
Yeah, I mean, so what was awesome is you have a drop ceiling. I used to just get like a longer monopod and just use the butt of the monopod. I would move the tile over and then I would put the photo and the camera above ceiling, and pretty much you just have a 360 photo on a floor plan of what's above the ceiling. So you give that to your, coordination team. They start looking in, say you need to start making cores. We want to add some bathrooms in a hospital, something like that. um, you know, those renovations become a lot more smoother. If you try doing that with your iPhone, good luck.
Yeah.
Pretty much that was one of the easiest ways to do it. I mean, there's been times even where we need to see like a cavity, like what was in the cavity. We just core through like a large enough hole just to slip the camera through with omnidirectional light. We can give you guys links to that stuff too, but
Yeah, and that's a good point too. You can obviously see on that image to the right of kind of the 360 camera, it's really well lit, and that's a huge thing that again we're putting out more stuff to help you guys kind of understand how you get to that level of quality. But I love that picture that you put in here, Brian, because it is so true. It's like you can't manage what you can't see, and I think when you look at this and you can start to see above these ceiling tiles, and it's just a non-invasive way of just doing really effective pre-construction is going in and popping on a tile and poking a 360 camera up there and really identifying what that looks like, but not just doing that as like having a standalone photo. Having that in context of where it's at on the floor plan is just huge. And so I love the above ceiling stuff kind of noted on the pre-con side of it. And then really this last part is just site logistics, right? So we all know that this is something that clients and customers want access to, and that's really because they are doing things in terms of just communicating how the construction is going to happen on site. And the big part to this too is that how do you communicate that effectively? And you can do that from both the ground and the air. This is actually a screenshot of a tool that we've heard from a lot of customers recently, which is called CM Builder. They're an amazing site logistics tool that really help communicate how the construction process is going to happen. And really where DroneDeploy comes into that is that we are really effective at capturing the site and the current conditions of it, like we mentioned in the pre-site survey. And so the idea here is that you can capture that and then really start to bring in different equipment and animations and models into this environment to really help communicate what those site logistics will look like. I think this is really becoming a standard for a lot of project pursuits, is really helping the owner understand how the project is going to get built. And we get really excited about folks bringing in aerial documentation into that process. CM Builder is a great tool to do that. There are a few others out there that we've heard from a lot of folks too. And so I just love seeing how aerial documentation in that part can bring into it too. And Brian, talk a little bit about that image on the right, because it's a less technical version of enhanced site logistics, but why is that kind of important too of what you're seeing in the 2D side of it?
I mean, honestly, just the less modeling you need to do at this phase. I mean, yeah, just the easier it is to talk logistics. I mean, I've used 2D maps even for like pick plans, understanding drop off of material, and just like getting an idea of what your site's gonna look like once you start doing other things on top of it. It's
Yeah, well said.
pretty straightforward. I
And
mean,
just to be clear here too, there's a huge difference between just a normal Google satellite image and what your project site looks like. We don't have to get into that if you have been through that struggle before of seeing the satellite view being very outdated. And that's obviously where the aerial documentation comes in. A 15-minute flight can produce the current orthomosaic or map of the site for you to kind of get going on the pre-construction side of it.
yeah, it's
Cool.
it's also now just like expectations from the owners and what they're looking to see. I mean, you're going up in a competitive bid. Even like BIM was seen as something like the large companies were doing, and you're seeing some of the relatively smaller companies get more advanced with how they just like show logistics. I mean, you're going into a school project. You better come in very prepared and every angle that you can to show like you're not going to disrupt or be in the pathway of existing students.
Yeah, well said. And again, that doesn't happen from just the ground. It doesn't happen from just the air. You really need tools that help can document both phases of that and both perspectives. And so, yeah, great note here on the pre-construction side of it. And then let's move over here into construction. And so the idea here is that this is again broken up into different sub phases, right? And really, I think what we wanted to get into here was really just what those sub phases are. And what we are going to go into is the substructure phase, right? And so this is really important because, Brian, you mentioned this idea of earthwork. And so I'll kind of let you dive into this one and talk about why this is such a critical thing to capture and why we put it in the playbook.
I mean, there was a project yesterday that just asked me like, we're just doing a lot of these drone flights already. Like, what else can we get out of it? I mean, this is when you start showing that you can create volumetric calculations with a couple clicks. Uh, you see the eyes light up because it's a process that you're already doing. Most people are just flying drone photos on their site to just show something's going on. Like, you could have that be autonomous, click, get volumetric calculations, and start actually, track what's going on. A lot of this it's a race to the bottom. Every piece of information is helpful. The less guessing you need to do, and the less, the more things that you have at your disposal that you're already doing that take small amounts of time lead you to just being on track. And how a project starts, this is where a lot of the time advantages sets the tone for how the project's going to get completed.
Yeah, well said. And I think that's really why we put this point up in the top right, which is just this idea of more than visual. Like, clearly, there's a lot of change happening in the earthwork phase that you're going to see even better when you're capturing from the air, whether you are just taking progress photos or panos or videos. But the real value of using drones in the earthwork phase is all of the actual numbers and actual data that comes from it. And so this isn't a session about photogrammetry and how that comes to be. If obviously you're interested and want to know all the deep and technical parts of how we get to here, we can for sure go over that. But the idea here, again, to this audience of why we put this in the playbook is that there's a lot of things changing on your job, and you should be able to measure and track that and do that really effectively. And this is where drones just shine. Like, this is probably why drones have taken off so much, no pun intended, in the construction industry, is that the earthwork phase is just a critical phase to do that. And so if you're interested in like really diving into what this looks like, this is, I would for sure say, one of the core parts of DroneDeploy's platform is really making this part of the life cycle as easy to visualize, as easy to understand, as easy to track. And so obviously that's why we wanted to put that in here as this part of the phase.
Even, I mean, we're all probably going to be here for another 12 to 15 minutes. And we have a couple other sections where a lot of people are going to be able to flip through and kind of go through their self. Like, do you want to talk about maybe how this playbook was, like, why we kind of created it, how it could be used?
Yeah, totally. And I think even like kind of continuing through here, right? Like, we're not going to spend a ton of time on each of these different sub phases, right? Like, the idea here is really to give you guys a high level overview of some of these things. And, the reason Brian and I wanted to do this was like, hey, personalize this, know who the authors and who some of the content creators of this was, because we want you guys to reach out. Like, we want you to kind of answer questions here. So yeah, Brian, we'll keep flying through this here, just through some of these other sub phases as well.
Utilities came up recently in that in Revisto on a couple of the GCs you've been working with, right?
Yeah, I think the cool part about this is, again, you're going to eventually cover this stuff, right? And to be able to just capture it from the ground is really not enough. It's super helpful to be able to go down and snap a 360 image, or really just a standard image of what was there, to go back in time. But when you're capturing this from the air, you're really capturing, tens of acres and really your entire site that you're able to see. And it's not just the map. I think the cool part, Brian, you're talking about on the Revista side is like, you can export this data into other platforms that you're using. And I think what we are hearing a lot from customers is that, yeah, we want to combine this with all of our coordination models and really all the other efforts that we're putting in to making sure that this gets built right virtually. And I've loved seeing some of those applications and what customers have been starting to do. Love it. Well, keep chatting, keep putting some more comments there on the LinkedIn chat here. We're going to keep moving through the substructure phase and kind of wrap up on foundations, right? So again, you can kind of see some examples here of what it looks like to do overlays. Overlays are another great feature within DroneDeploy to be able to take your plans and be able to overlay those on top of the map. And then Brian, kind of walk us through what folks are seeing on the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple different vantage points. The overlays are great because this is one of the like many phases where you can really compare as built to like as designed. But then on the ground too, like you just need a couple different vantage points depending on what you're looking to do. I
Yep.
mean,
And
the
I love the
yeah,
timeline too there, right? Like all the dates nicely organized to that exact same place. You can go back in time and obviously see it from when the formwork was being put up to obviously when it was being stripped.
even even with when you really start dissecting, anytime there may be an issue or a problem, it's never the last photo that you need. It's a combination of like 10 to 15 photos that may be in that same exact spot that led to that issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like say we have a leak in the basement, like, okay, well, what was the waterproofing look like, all right, what material was stored against that wall, etc. So
Yeah, well said. All right, we're going to keep us moving here. We're going to move into the next phase here, which is structure. Structure is broken down into two, which is pretty typical, which is concrete structure and steel structure. We didn't add a lot in here for wood structures yet. We know a lot of you guys are doing that, which is super exciting to see. But the two that we focused on in here is concrete structure and steel structure. And so this is, I think, one of my favorite parts of the life cycle and really a sub phase of that life cycle because this is where we really start to get a lot of the power of ground and air data coming together. This really cool example here is showing a walk, so a 360 walk that was done on top of a drone map to really give you context of what you're walking on top of when you visualize it from the aerial perspective. Why is this important? We have heard and seen a lot of people that put these walks on top of floor plans, either structural drawings or other things that you may have as just drawings, but context is incredibly critical in this part. And so when you're able to put those walks on top of the actual map that was created from the day that you did the walk, it is even more helpful. And so I love showing this example because it really gives you an idea of what you can see and what it is that you're capturing. And so you can obviously see there's some sleeves in here. There's an overlay on top of this, which was from a design file. And then obviously you can go down into that specific spot and see what was going on from the ground if you want a more detailed perspective outside of what you're seeing from the aerial map. Brian, you know that this is my favorite phase, but anything that you would add to this that you have seen and heard from a lot of customers that use this?
John Andres quote, "You can't erase concrete." And I think, I mean, also Peter sent a message in here, but I was looking at your background, Peter. I mean, you work in wastewater treatment plant divisions, like majority of it is mechanical and concrete. We were actually visiting a site in Atlanta 2 weeks ago. Shout out Pablo for giving us a tour of the Big Creek. But yeah, no, I mean, concrete, that's also like, what does a missed sleeve really cost you? And like, if you were to do the math, no one's really going to argue like $500, maybe 1,000, depending on the circumstances. But it's just like peace of mind. Like, how much of your day are you spending chasing down mistakes as opposed to thinking about what is going to be an issue down the line and preventing it? So
Mm-hmm.
concrete's one of the easiest ones because people just get it. Like, you have to go core a hole. Like, it took you less time to just fly that map than to coordinate 2 to 3 people to go back and core a hole and then reroute something else.
Yeah, well said. There's so much stuff. We'll probably be doing our own explained just around this phase because there is so much stuff, even from what you're seeing here with the overlays and the walks and the map that was created. So let's get over to steel, which is the second part to the structure phase. And Brian, I want to have you kind of explain this because you were kind of the proponent of adding these pictures at the top and really some of the stuff down below. So kind of give us a lay of the land of why documenting from both the air and the ground in the steel phase is just as effective too.
So, classic first thing I was told I had to do. Well, not told, but like my first my first task when I first stepped on site was go track how much decking is getting completed. Right, like go print out the plan, get a highlighter every day, and mark a box of like square footage roughly. Right, all right, I guess they're on this column line. I'm like doing this. I was like, okay, great. Like, this would be so much easier if I could just have a photo from above. um, Looking at these photos side by side, you kind of get to take away a lot of the manual having to draw like the outlines and stuff like that. So for me, it's different vantage points. It's easier to see an entire site from a single photo. And especially if you can look at those side by side weekly, whether you're doing monthly recs or you just kind of want to know, what's going on and not have to manually write everything down in a notebook.
Yeah. I think steel in a weird way kind of reminds me of the earthwork phase from how fast things change. It's crazy how fast just some of the steel folks that I've seen put up steel and erect all these different components of these buildings that have just gotten way, way more complex. And it's crazy. I mean, you can see at the top here with the 2 dates. I think these were only like a month and a half apart. And it's crazy how much changes. And those are actually 2 aerial panos. So you're only seeing obviously one perspective of that, but imagine being able to spin in any different direction from the air and see all the progress that's changing and happening over just even that short amount of time. And then on the bottom too, it's like you're walking these jobs and obviously doing 360 captures on the ground as well. And in this case, you can see you actually are walking in an open air part of it, and then you're walking underneath. And so sometimes, again, if you go back to just putting those on a floor plan, you don't get that context before you go down to that ground walk. And so that's what I really love, again, in showcasing really the ground and air coming together in the structural phase, is when you can see the map as your context of where your walks are, down to then selecting what ground capture you want to see and walk into, it just becomes a different way to experience your site. You're no longer just like having to guess and make assumptions of what was on that date on a floor plan. And so I love seeing these just photos that we kind of found here to put in here just to showcase all the things in the steel structure that I think we hear a lot and often about just the value of combining both the ground and air together.
Yeah, and
All right.
also like your steel punch list. Like when you
Sure.
when you punch it out, like everything looks the same from your iPhone camera roll.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like steel, like column, beam, like it's very tough to really like understand what's going on in a photo. So just having like a physical context on the drawing is good.
Yep. Well said. All right. We're going to keep us moving here. We're going to move into the exterior phase. And so facade is a huge part here. Again, one of my favorite parts here. I think Construction Safety Week is coming up here in a week or so. And there is no better tool to enhance safety on your job than doing drone facade inspections. And I personally just love really all the features that we've kind of meticulously added to DroneDeploy to make this really a seamless, easy to use, simple solution to go and document these facades. And so really what we kind of wanted to focus on here is really 2 parts. So again, this is really primarily where you're doing a lot of aerial capture, right? We've seen a lot of people do exterior documentation with 360 cameras, but you're limited by perspective, right? You can only put a 360 camera up so high. We've seen some imagery from 360 cameras mounted to drones, a creative solution, but why not just use the 20 megapixel high resolution image from the drone itself? Like that seems to make the most sense when you're doing these inspections. And so really what we're focusing on here that you're seeing on this page is really 2 parts. 1, the capture, and then 2, the analysis side of it. So if you didn't know, DroneDeploy has a flight mode in their flight app that allows you to plan facade missions. And the benefit to this is really a couple parts. 1, it allows you to do it on a repeatable basis so that you know that you're capturing the same parts of the facade that you intend to inspect. And 2, it's just safer. I think when we're doing these facade inspections, we really want to creep closer and closer to the building. But obviously, as a drone pilot, and a lot of folks know, like that just is where safety begins to become a risk. And so what I love about this feature, and again, we'll put way more content out about this if you haven't seen this, but it allows you to take your 360, or it allows you to take your image from the drone, and it takes the high res image and shows that to you in context to where it was captured on your building. And the benefit to that is really what you're seeing up top. So up top is the processed model from the facade inspection that you do. And below is the high res image that it gives you the ability to zoom in to every megapixel that you need to see on that image. And the way of, doing man lift inspections and all these kind of things are just a thing of the past. And Brian, I could talk about this for days, but I know you got a lot of things to add in here.
I mean, I was mostly the penthouse and the roof guy and facade, like curtain wall, stuff like that. So you're bringing back flashbacks of like, this is your virtual scissor lift. Maybe I could coin that term. Like you go up, down. I mean, you can even like on your keyboard, you go up, down, side to side. Like if you go into the 3D model and you click the inspect tool, you can click on a section of the area you want to look at, and then you can go left, right, up, down, just like as if you were in the drone. And then also like the prior to the acquisition, I was kind of managing a lot of the 360 drone workarounds. There were workarounds. It wasn't a workflow. And the issue is like you're looking at one building, so the 360 is kind of unnecessary. The quality is not going to be there, and then also you don't really have like that geo reference data in space. So like X, Y, Z, and then being able to like mesh it into something where you can easily like go left, right, up, down. So that was always my issue. I mean, look, like you're probably going to have a waterproofing consultant. They still need to come out. You're still going to have to do your water testing, but the difference here is, having that peace of mind before you start putting on the metal panels, or before you start, before you start putting on the insulation. Like, is everything caulked? Like, do I need to get in a boom lift and go scale this entire building? Can I just look at this and then, if I have to go back, look at it and just verify that that wasn't the issue, it was something that happened after the date?
I'm stealing that term, Brian, virtual scissor lift. I mean, it's
I
so
like
true.
that. I was thinking virtual boom lift, but like
That sounds
it's
a little
not.
weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's tough because, with the boom, you got to go up and down. I think I like booms better personally to ride, but this is a whole nother conversation.
Whole nother topic. This is
Yeah.
if you
But a
haven't
scissor
seen
lift's
this,
easier. Scissor
yeah,
lift's
there you go.
easier. You're up, down, side to side. You can,
Yeah,
yeah.
love it. From the
All
safety
right.
of your desk and in the office too. So so much stuff to cover here. Again, we just want to highlight, truly, drones are the best way to investigate and just inspect facades. And so if you aren't familiar with how to do that within DroneDeploy, we will continue to put more content in front of y'all that really helps explain this. But again, for folks that haven't seen kind of how you do it from the flight to the processing to the visual, which is what we're showing here, we just want to kind of give a quick summary of that. So all right, the last thing in the exterior is the roofing side of it, which is really cool to talk about. I think what's really neat about this is similar to the structural phase. You start to combine these ground and air components together, and you get a really powerful tool. And the best part about this is, again, you can put a walk on top of a floor plan, and that's great. But what you're missing is the real world context of what it is that you're walking on and what it looked like that day from an aerial view. And so what you're seeing here is a walk that was processed on top of a roof. Brian here put the 360 camera comparisons of different parts in time with this little parapet wall. And then the other part here that's super exciting that, again, a lot of people don't know about, but this is what we're trying to help with, is the thermal aspect of it. There are so many things from thermal drones and capabilities to capture and process thermal data that just make the roofing part a huge, huge part of really why we wanted to include this in the playbook, is the reality that ground and air data should live together in this part. This is really, really impactful because you are starting to see the holistic view from the aerial map, and then also the ground view from the 360 imagery, and then taking another layer into the kind of unseen world of what you're seeing on the thermal side. So if you didn't know that DroneDeploy could process thermal data, obviously this is what we wanted to show you. Brian, sorry I interrupted you. Please, I could go on forever on the roofing side too.
Roofings are a different beast. I mean, majority of your claims are going to come from water intrusion. So making sure your envelope is tight is always important. Parapet walls, every architect's designing these like crazy transitions where roofs are slanting, and, the types of materials are becoming more advanced on like the overlaps, and you're dealing with 2 to 3 consultants who are making sure this is definitely getting put in the right way. And you don't just want to start covering something up without documenting it before, in case somebody else needs to see it or they need to verify it, or, FM Global. There's a whole world that we could do on just roofs alone. But I think if you're looking at roofs, the mapping is great for like even square footage or quantity tracking of how much is getting done, production tracking. And then the 360 photos are really going to be good at these really weird transition parapet walls. You need to leave some gaps, overlaps, small things like that.
Yeah, well said. I think a resounding theme throughout this book is why ground and air data need to live together. If you're only capturing one, you're really missing out on the other half that is really helping tell the whole story. And so roofing kind of wraps up the exterior phase here. Let's move on over into interior, which is what we're going to talk about next. Brian, you want to
Yeah.
kind of walk us through this page?
I was just gonna say also, like, I know we already went over time, and I don't think anyone's stopping us, so we can kind of just get we can just get through that. We had
Keep
like this
going,
mental
Brian. We're
block of
we're we're
1:30,
nearing the
but
finish.
I can't tell if anyone's even in here, but I'm having a good time with my friend Peter. So, and Andrew's giving us some support. So, all right, let's go to the interior framing portion. I mean, look, you just tracking like what's going on. Interestingly enough, I met an intern that started his internship like at a later stage in the project and was using the retroactive 360 photos to like teach himself like framing, like these very complex framing scenes and like the stages, and like retroactively going through photos. That was like his learning and development tool. So I think if the photo is good enough to retroactively teach somebody how the wall is framed, it's good enough to go check that everything is getting done the way it's supposed to be getting done.
Yeah, there's so much stuff we could go into. This has clearly become really the starting point that I think a lot of people have started to use 360 capture. The interior phase speaks for itself. The value that's here, the simplicity of using the iOS app and really the Android, basically your phone, to go and capture these, place them on your drawing, do walks to cover an immense amount of area. We really just kind of wanted to focus on here of like the critical capture milestones. So these are things that, again, Brian and I were like, man, when we were thinking of these, what are things that we wish we would have known after doing a couple projects of where we would want to tell people like, hey, everyone I think kind of knows before you rock a wall is important, but what about the phases of that, right? You have a lot of wall backing or wood backing that goes into these walls. Like, it's really important to document that stuff. You have miscellaneous steel. That's another huge thing that gets covered up, and now you quickly don't remember where it's at. And so I think the big point on the interior framing side of it, again, a lot of you are probably familiar with why this is important and obviously why we included it as a part of this book. But really, we wanted to add in here just like the critical capture milestones to that. And one of the best quotes I've heard is just like capture with intention. And sometimes knowing what your critical capture milestones are really helping you do that of capturing with intention. So, Brian, I'm going to keep you going here and moving into the MEP and finishes side of it. I love these pictures. Give us a little lay of the land of what we're seeing here.
I mean, let's start with mechanical penthouses. Most important thing is sequence, right? You put something in before something else is supposed to be in, and even though it looks like it should have been there before, you could screw up everything. Just putting things up, just to take them back down is always an issue. Being able just to look at like your virtual model, your field team, you just want to be able to make a couple clicks. You don't want to have to use some sort of like specialized computer to open anything. I mean, actually, no. Nowadays, like that's getting much better. Revisto launched their app. You can do it on your phone now. So the BIM model is definitely getting to a point where it's a lot more usable. But having it next to the photos and context of what's going on of real world to, as built versus as design is just important. Everything from fire stopping penetrations to just making sure things are installed at the right quality. This definitely is better than taking a mechanical drawing and taking a Sharpie and highlighter and just marking that up every single day.
Yeah, well said. And man, you want to talk about just one of probably the most effective parts of where a 360 camera is being the most useful. I mean, we've all walked through mechanical rooms and mechanical spaces, and we can't even keep our eyes on it or our head on a swivel enough to know what's going on. And just to have a 360 camera in some of these areas is just critical, right? We all know that. And I think, again, this kind of plays a little bit off of the interior phase as well in the framing of, hey, we know this is valuable, but what do we do with that? What does that mean? And really what we wanted to showcase here is really, yeah, the model component of it and really bringing that in to see some of these. We know that you guys are, using other great tools to view your models, whether it's Procore Model Viewer or Navisworks or Reviz2. And like, we just want the idea of, hey, these two things should live together. They do live together within this platform if that's where you want to view it most easily. if you want to view it in a completely separate tool, you can obviously do that too. And so just so much that we can cover here. I'm sure we could do our own kind of master class around the mechanical side of it too, just to bring in some things. And there's some good quotes in here that, again, you guys can read through and kind of get an understanding of as well. So rounding things up on the interior side with finishes, Brian, again, this one kind of speaks for itself, but things you'd want to add in here?
Speaks for itself. I mean,
yeah,
like let's not go too deep into this, but you turn over a room, staircase, they want to start bringing in the furniture before the building's even completed. Walls are going to get dinged up. You're going to have a never-ending punch list. Everybody who's you're at your last, you're at the last stretch, and usually the last 10% is the hardest, getting everything done. So
yeah,
the more things you can get rid of. I think everybody here kind of gets this one.
Yeah, I think the big part that maybe some kind of shared lessons learned that we've heard is just like folks documenting it before they really get into some of the owner provided furniture and things. I think like that's a huge part, right? Like you guys are finishing up these buildings and want to obviously document the state that you got it to. And to do that with, again, 360 cameras and the ability to go into these rooms. We have a lot of people ask, like, can you do punch list from these things? And sure, you can. And I think you can obviously see the painter's tape in a lot of ways here. But I don't think this replaces the need to do in-person punch. You obviously need to go and see it and kind of experience if it's to the quality that you need. Obviously, the images are, high quality enough. But I think the thing that is really important to note here is that this really, we've heard from a lot of folks, is just kind of their final signature on what they delivered, that if they need to go back to in time, obviously they have a really good record of doing it. So that rounds out the interior phase. We're going to wrap up here on the closeout phase. And so lastly, on the closeout part of it, if you didn't know, this is obviously incredibly important, because let's start with the end in mind. And oftentimes the end in mind is taking this information out, giving it as a deliverable over to your clients that you're working with. Brian, do you want to talk about obviously what we're kind of highlighting and showing in this part?
Yeah. I mean, we just kind of wanted to show what the handover process looks like. So, it's great. You may be showing these photos to the owners, and the question is going to come up of, okay, great. I love that you're taking these photos. I paid you to build this building already. Like, this is great. You're being effective. How does this kind of translate to us maybe potentially using these photos? So you still have the option to offline deliverable the hyperlinked photos for the interior maintenance teams, having it be quick enough if they need to. I mean, a lot of these projects will like complete, and within a couple months, like, oh, let's do some renovations, or we're going to redo this room. Or even if you say you're just doing the base building and someone else doing the TI, like you need to be able to have some sort of export out of our platform to hand over to people on some sort of thumb drive. I mean, some committees even still have you give things on a CD. Like I think the ADA, the plans, like you still need to give it on a CD. So there is still a truth to having something physical. You don't always want everything in the cloud. And, for whatever reason, if you choose to part ways with us, you're not worried about getting cuffed to our platform. And that's the kind of peace of mind we want to give you.
I think the part, and it's funny, maybe we'll add this in as kind of a text here too, Brian, but it's like, this should be self-service. Like you guys should be able to go in here anytime, pull your data, send it to who you need to send it to, offline it when you want to. Like this isn't behind a closed gate. Like that isn't how we kind of view data at DroneDeploy. This is yours. Like you should be able to have access to it whenever you want, not have to put a support ticket in. And that's really what we're allowing you to do in here. And so if you're unfamiliar with this kind of closeout phase and what it looks like to transition things offline into your owner's hands, or if they just want to keep it online and how do you archive projects, again, we are continuing to put more content out to help kind of clarify what that could look like. And so we hope that.
Do you have the? Sorry, I'm so sorry. Do you have the next? So I think was it Samuel? Do you have the next page of this playbook, or did you just stop it at this closeout slide?
Nope. It's
oh, you have the full thing. All right.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Go to the. All right. So Samuel, if you're still listening, go to like the integrations pages. So you can. That one. So if Samuel, if you're listening, like we can tie all this data in with Procore observations, RFIs, interior and exterior. but also you can go back and flip through these pages and you'll have like the BIM comparison. You'll be able to tie it in with, I think you asked about, oh, Samuel's here. Nice. Thanks for the note. Yeah, so BIM we can do. Cyclone, not really, because that's just like a registration software for a lot of the LiDAR data. Procore, absolutely. And there's a lot. And then how far along is DroneDeploy with StruxAid for walkthrough? We're gonna start showing some sneak peeks of that in the coming months, but it is one of the top priorities of the company. I mean, we already have like the live linking between platforms, but you know, that'll be its own special type of scenario. But yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I got that before Samuel, if you had somewhere to be.
Yeah, well said. And we won't go over the unique workflows here. We are already a little over from our intended time, and appreciate you guys even sticking with
Yeah.
us for this long and adding things on here. But we may actually just do another session on these specifically. And honestly, a thought Brian and I had was really just having folks come in and explain this outside of us. Obviously, Brian and I were kind of authors and helping make this into something that you guys can use. But we want you guys to hear from people that are actually using this and actually putting these into practice. And so we may actually bring in some folks to help explain some of these pages in more detail. And so with that kind of being said, we appreciate you guys listening in. This has been an incredibly fun thing to work on. It's been really cool to see just the feedback that we've had so far. Obviously, we released it earlier this week, and we could not be more excited to see where this continues to grow and continues to provide value for y'all. And so I think we're kind of looking at the chat here still too, which is really fun to see. If you guys have questions, I think someone asked for our emails. We will put that in the chat as well. You can also connect with us here on LinkedIn as well from just all these things that we're trying to put out through this medium. But if you guys have ideas too, like if one of these is maybe specific topic that you want us to dive into deeper, please let us know. Like we understand the reality to this is going to come from all your feedback and what you guys see as valuable. And so we appreciate you guys sticking around here. Brian, any kind of closing thoughts as we end things up?
No, I think we're going to start looking to do more of these LinkedIn live sessions. I mean, it's great, like the questions that people are asking, and you know, us just putting out video and content. Like there's a ton of resources. Samuel, you can download it. When you look at the link, you'll see a little download button. But I mean, putting these types of resources are kind of to help self-serve, and a lot of the people on this call too just internally help educate. I mean, most of the time it's the people that we're in contact with that get it and why they want to use it, but they need help relaying that within the organization. And putting it in phases of construction is one of the easiest ways to get people on board of like, yes, we have a project in this phase. This is what we can do right now, rather than like trying to sell them on like, do you know you could fly your drone autonomously? And so that's all it is. So looking to do more of these sessions. If you guys have any ideas, feel free to throw them in the comments or send me a Grant a message on LinkedIn.
Yeah, well said. We appreciate you guys tuning in. This has been really fun, not only for us, but more fun just to collaborate and hear from you guys. And so keep the feedback coming, both positive and critical feedback. Like if there's things that this is actually the kind of the second round. We had a soft launch to some folks that just said, hey, give us some feedback. And we actually added 2 or 3 more pages that we didn't have it here originally. And so we really do value and honor that feedback. It's been really helpful for us. And again, we just thank you guys for tuning in with us here. We hope this has been helpful. This will stay on LinkedIn. If you guys want to share it with anyone to kind of walk through, I'm sure we'll chop this up and make it into kind of small bite-sized pieces if people are interested in certain phases that we went over. But appreciate you guys tuning in. This has been really great. Brian, thanks for joining in with me here. It's some fun new technical things that we're trying, and I think all went well, hopefully too. And so appreciate you guys making the time, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Yeah, you got me. I got a little nervous on the last one because right before we were starting this, the camera thing wasn't starting.
Hey, that's all right. We're learning along the way, and so you guys are learning along here with us. So appreciate you guys making the time. Look forward to connecting with you all here on LinkedIn and other places. And so we appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.